We're going to be looking at a variety of systems in the human body as we move through this unit. And the first system we want to look at is the respiratory system. So take a deep breath, and here we go. First, to start off, here are a few fun facts about your respiratory system. Did you know that you take between 17,000 and 29,000 breaths every day? So in an average lifetime, that means that you'll be taking between 500 million and 750 million breaths. From that very first breath, right after birth, up until your last, we don't really pay much attention to breathing usually. It's something that happens automatically, and we don't really think too much about it unless we're struggling with it. With every breath that you take, you're bringing in 3 to 4 liters of air to your lungs, and that's important. The composition of that air is going to play a key role in many of the processes that are going on in your body. So what exactly are we breathing in those 3 to 4 liters of air? If we take a look at the composition of air, it is a mixture of gases. The most predominant gas in the atmosphere is nitrogen, and that is at a percentage of 78%. Next comes oxygen at 21%, argon at 1%, 0.04% is carbon dioxide, and then we have lesser amounts of other gases that may be present in the air. Why do we need that oxygen that's present in the air? All animal cells and all plant cells need oxygen for survival. Cells use that oxygen to obtain energy from food in a special process called cellular respiration. We'll talk a little bit about cellular respiration in grade 10. You'll learn quite a bit more about it as you proceed through biology courses in high school and beyond. So what happens during cellular respiration is that the glucose that we obtain from our diet. So when you eat food and food goes through the digestive system, various enzymes and chemical reactions are happening to release the nutrients from that food. And one of the nutrients we really need is glucose. So glucose is released from your digestive system into your bloodstream, and then your blood cells carry it, and your plasma carries it to all the different cells in your body. And that glucose will enter the cell and undergo cellular respiration so that we can take the energy stored in that glucose molecule and turn it into a useful energy that we need in the body. So what happens during cellular respiration, that glucose is going to react with oxygen. Carbon dioxide waste is going to be formed that we have to get rid of, and we do that by exhaling. Water is also a product, and the key part of cellular respiration is that energy will be released, and that energy was originally stored within the chemical bonds of that glucose. So we can take a look at the chemical equations for cellular respiration. The first word equation would read glucose plus oxygen yields carbon dioxide plus water plus energy. And if we look at that in terms of a chemical reaction, you see that glucose is C6H12O6. What we have to react that glucose with is actually 6 molecules of oxygen, and that's going to yield 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, 6 molecules of water, and that very important energy molecule, which is an energy currency form that we call ATP. And ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate, and that's a molecule that powers all of the things that go on in our body. So every molecule of glucose that undergoes cellular respiration, about 32 to 36 ATP are formed. And again, we use that ATP to power everything that's going on in our body, such as growth, movement, building new molecules, passing things into cells, copying DNA. All of the things that are vital to our survival require that energy that comes with the ATP molecule. How do we supply oxygen to our body cells? That's the process of gas exchange. So if we're talking about a very simple organism like a jellyfish or a sponge, that oxygen will diffuse directly from the environment through the membrane. And remember when we talked about diffusion earlier, that's just the passage of substances from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. So oxygen would be in high concentration outside of the organism, in low concentration inside, so it would just naturally diffuse across the cell membrane into that simple organism. For more complex multicellular organisms like humans, that process doesn't work quite the same way. We actually need a respiratory system so that we can have efficient delivery of oxygen and, importantly, the removal of the waste carbon dioxide that we really have to get rid of from our body because carbon dioxide if it dissolves in water, produces carbonic acid, and that can shift the pH inside of our body, make our body too acidic, and that can have very serious negative consequences to the various reactions that are going on in our body. So for humans and other mammals, that gas exchange is going to occur in two places. It's going to occur in our lungs, and it's also going to occur at our body cells when we're delivering the gases, the oxygen, to the cells that need it for cell respiration. There are a few key structures in the human and mammalian respiratory system. These traits of the respiratory system allow it to work effectively and efficiently. Our respiratory system is made up of structures that have very thin walls that allow for easy diffusion of gases. They also have a moist surface, so again, that aids in the diffusion process. The lungs, when we take a look at a key structure in the lungs, there's large surface area. Again, that makes for efficient transport of those gases across the system. And also the respiratory system is supplied with a rich blood supply. There's a lot of capillaries that are surrounding those organs in the respiratory system to ensure that there is very efficient delivery of oxygen and efficient removal of carbon dioxide. So if we take a look at a diagram of the respiratory system, it's a fairly simple structure, and we can take a look at the key pieces to it, and you should be able to label this type of diagram on your own. So if we take a look first at where air is coming in, it's coming in through the nasal cavity is one option. It can also come in through the oral cavity, so you can breathe in through your nose or you can breathe in through your mouth. From there, the air is going to pass through the back of your throat. We would call that area the pharynx. And then as it's going past the pharynx in the back of the throat, it's going to pass this structure called the epiglottis. And what happens with the epiglottis, when we are eating, you'll notice that in behind the trachea, there is the esophagus, and that's leading down into our digestive system. What we don't want to happen is when we're eating for food to go down into our respiratory system. That could cause problems within our lungs. It could cause choking. So what happens, this little flap of cartilage tissue called the epiglottis will come down over the trachea and prevent food from entering that region and prevents us from choking. In this region as well, there's a number of structures that make up our larynx, and you might know that structure as your voice box where your vocal cords are. So that's also down in this region of the respiratory system. And then air is going to pass through these structures, so it goes in through the nasal cavity and oral cavity, past the pharynx, past the epiglottis, past the larynx, and into the trachea. And you'll notice that trachea is made up of these ring-type structures, and that's a cartilage. And it's important that we have this kind of stiff structure to the trachea. We want the trachea to stay open. We want air to freely flow through. And so if this was more floppy, we would have that risk of this trachea kind of collapsing on itself. We wouldn't get a proper air supply. So that trachea has these rings of cartilage to keep it open, to allow easy flow of air through. Once the air comes past the trachea, it's going to branch kind of like a tree. And the first large branching points that it's going to enter are the left and right bronchus. In plural, we would say bronchi. And notice the labeling of direction. When you're labeling human anatomy, you have to imagine that this diagram is repositioned on your body. So when we look at the body direction, the left side of the diagram will be the right side of the body. The right side of the diagram will be the left side of the body. And again, you have to imagine this thing transposed on your own body to get the direction right. So again, this branch is kind of like a tree. So the bronchi, you might have heard of disorders like bronchitis. And what that would be inflammation of these bronchi structures, the left and right bronchus. And as they get inflamed, that would make it really harder for breathing to happen. So if you've had bronchitis, you know what I'm talking about. And that just means that these structures were inflamed during your illness. Those larger structures then branch down into smaller kind of branching points, and those are called bronchioles. So we go from bronchus to bronchiole, and those are in all parts of the lung, right and left lung. And they're just smaller and smaller structures delivering oxygen. So again, we have the left lung on the right side of the diagram, the right lung on the left. And then we also have important structure underneath, and that's a very strong muscle called the diaphragm. The diaphragm separates your chest cavity from your abdominal cavity, and it's going to play an important role in how we inhale and exhale. So it's going to be important for the mechanics of breathing. So again, all of these structures you should know, you should be able to label, and again, be mindful of the direction, right side of the diagram, left side of the body. What that original diagram didn't show is that at the end of those bronchioles, there's these very important structures that are critical for gas exchange in the lungs. So these things are well supplied with blood. So what you have coming down in the blue is a branch of what we call the pulmonary artery. That's a vessel that's coming from the heart, and it's delivering oxygen-poor blood. That's why we color it blue. Blood is always red, but we just color it blue to show that it's got low levels of oxygen. This would make sense. You're sending arteries and vessels from the heart to the lungs to pick up oxygen. So as it's going toward the lungs, it's going to have a low level of oxygen initially. The other structure coming through is the bronchiole. So this is kind of, remember those really tiny branching points within the left and right lung. The bronchiole is going to end on this grape-like sac of structures, and these are the critical structures for gas exchange. They're called alveoli. If we were we're just talking about one of those grape structures on the alveoli, we would call it an alveolus. And you've got clusters of those to increase surface area for gas exchange. Covering the alveoli is that network and that netting of capillaries. And you'll notice the blood supply is in really close association with the alveoli. This is very important. Structure is dictating function again here, as we often see in biology. So these capillaries want to be very close to the alveoli to maximize gas exchange. So those capillaries are going to pick up the oxygen very easily, and they're going to give up the carbon dioxide back into the lung structure so we can breathe it out. So this part of the diagram, critical for gas exchange, again, you should be able to label these parts as well. Once the capillaries pick up the oxygen, they're going to deliver that oxygen-rich blood, which we call oxygenated blood, back towards the heart through what we call the pulmonary vein. So that's going to take this oxygen-rich blood back in towards the heart. So what's happening in terms of gas exchange at that alveoli? Again, critical, this structure. You have that alveolus, which is kind of in the orange color. Surrounding that, like a net, is the capillary network that's going to be around all those alveoli, and that's shown here in blue. And what's going to happen, those capillaries are really close to the alveoli, and they're going to be able to move carbon dioxide from the blood to the alveoli. So we need to get rid of that waste carbon dioxide. It can't build up in our blood, or it'll change the pH and make it much too acidic, which could have really significantly dangerous consequences for the body. So we need to get rid of it. It moves by diffusion. So there's high CO2 concentrations in your blood because all your cells are going through cell respiration and producing carbon dioxide as a waste. That carbon dioxide is being funneled from the cells into your blood and being delivered by your blood to your lungs. So the CO2 is just going to move by diffusion from the blood capillary into the alveoli. From there, we're going to exhale it and get rid of it from our body. On the other hand, our alveoli are going to be rich in oxygen because we've just inhaled. So we've got a lot of oxygen. It's being delivered to those very terminal sacs of the lung, the alveoli, and it's going to move again by diffusion. It's high concentration inside the alveoli, low concentration inside the capillary, so it's going to naturally cross those really thin membranes from a high concentration to a low. So then our blood is going to become rich in oxygen. It's going to unload the CO2 and deliver that oxygen to other parts of the body. Again, because those capillaries and that alveoli have thin membranes, that diffusion is much easier. We need to get rid of that CO2. We're just going to exhale it out. And that oxygen that we pick up, the blood is going to carry to all the cells in your body so that the cells can undergo cell respiration. You should be able to trace the pathway of air as it enters the respiratory system through the nasal cavity and oral cavity. The other thing you should know as you're inhaling through those cavities, the air is becoming warmed. It's becoming moistened. You have hairs and you have mucus in those areas that are going to trap dust and other particles. We want to protect our lung tissue, so we try to get rid of all foreign particles before they get down into the respiratory system. As it traps it, you might sneeze. You can cough it up, but you're just going to try to prevent those particles from getting into your lungs. The air is going to go from there past your pharynx and your larynx into your trachea. Your trachea is lined with cilia, and those are special little hair-like projections that are going to effectively trap foreign material again. There's also mucus there, and that's going to help us protect that lung tissue, that sensitive lung tissue, and that important alveoli structure from foreign material getting in. Just to note, smokers, the cilia should be constantly moving and very flexible to trap those foreign material particles. But in a smoker, the cilia get kind of stuck with all of the products that cigarette smoking brings into the trachea. And so they're going to kind of be really slow and not effective in trapping that foreign material. And that can lead to that chronic smoker's cough that you might hear. From there, the air is going to go into the bronchi, into the right and left bronchus. From there into the bronchioles. So the air is going to go evenly into the right and left lung. And from the bronchioles into the alveoli, those terminal points of all this tree branching where you're going to get your gas exchange. So that is the respiratory system. We're going to talk next time about the mechanics of breathing. How do we inhale and exhale? What role is the brain playing in that process? And what role do different muscles, including the diaphragm and your ribcage muscles, have in that process as well? So for now, please know the structures of the respiratory system, be able to follow the pathway of air, understand what's happening at the alveoli with gas exchange, the oxygen and the carbon dioxide. So that is the respiratory system.